Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Upidavalava Giravarendari Gopijannavalava Giravarendari Pijannavalava Giravarendari Jashodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana Shodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajadana Ranjana Shodanandana Bhajadana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Navanachari Daya Radhamadha Kundabihari Adhamadha Kundabihari Daya Radhamadha Kundabihari Adhamadha Kundabihari Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Paribhajagacharya Asta Terasata Free Humanity with Divine Grace AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Vijay Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Paribhajagacharya Asta Terasata Sri Srimantala Bhakti Saranta Saraswati Thakur Vijay Ananda Kota Vaishnava Vrinda Vijay Namacharya Thakur Haridas Vijay Prem Shri Goho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Karuna Shri Asari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Vijay Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Chamakund Radhakund Gita Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Dwarkadham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Balaram Subhadra Ki Jai Shri Shigonitai Ki Jai Shri Lakshmi Narasingha Dev Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to the Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, Text 21 and 22. How long does the class go to? 9 o'clock. So I guess there's nothing on the board, so I'll just chant the Sanskrit and we'll do word for word. Samvatsaras chanda vega kalo yeno palakshita yashyahan iha gandharva gandharvyo ratrayasmicha haranchahu parikrancha svastutara satam trayam. So I see everyone's got a device, so maybe we can chant together the second verse. So I'll just read the translation and purport for this verse, and then we'll do text 22. What was previously explained as Chandravega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights, named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The word pratikrantya means by traveling. The living entity travels on his chariot day and night during a year consisting of 360 or more days and nights. Life's progress is taken for the unnecessary labor required to cover these 360 days and nights of life. Text 22. Kala kanya jara shaksha lokas tam na nibannati svasaram jagrihe mritu shashyaya yavaneshvara kala kanya jara shaksha lokas tam nabhi bandati svasharam jagrihe mritu shaya yavaneshvara. Next, please. Kalakanya jarat shakshal lokastam nam nibannati pasharam jagrihe mritu shaya yavaneshvara. Anyone else? Kalakanya jarat shakshal lokastam nanibannati pasharam jagrihe mritu shaya yavaneshvara. Kalakanya jarat shakshal lokastam nanibannati pasharam jagrihe mritu shaya yavaneshvara. Anyone else? Uttama? Kalakanya jara shaksha lokastam nanibannati swasharam jagrihe mritu shaya yavaneshvara. Kalakanya, the daughter of time, jara, old age, shakshat, directly, loka, all living entities, tam, her, na, never, avinandati, welcome, swasharam, as his sister, jagrihe, accepted, mritu, death, shayaya, for destruction, Yavana Ishvara, the king of the Yavanas. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshvara, Yavana Raj, who was death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Please repeat. What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavanaraj, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Purport. Encaged within the body, the living entity accepts Kalakanya, old age, just before death. Yavaneshvara is the emblem of death, Yamaraj. Before going to the place of Yamaraj, the living entity accepts Jara, old age, the sister of Yamaraj. One who is subjected to the influence of Yavanaraj and his sister, one is infected by them due to impious activity. Those who are in Krishna consciousness and are engaged in devotional service under the instructions of Narada Muni are not subjected to the influence of Yamaraj and his sister Jara. If one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. After leaving the material body, he does not accept another body that is material, but returns home back to Godhead. This is verified in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvashesha Sunyavadi Pashtatradesha Tarane Omagana Timarandasha Janan Janan Shalakaya Chakshurum Bilitam Dina Tasmai Shri Guruveni Namaha Mukam Karot Vivachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatam Aham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Yes, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna. So we are really very, very fortunate to have His Grace Partha Prabhu and Her Grace Uttam Mataji with us today. Of course, last 2 days they are with us, and they will be there another 2-3 days, at least up to Sunday. Just for benefit of my own purification and others, those who are online, just a few words. His Grace Partha Prabhu and his wife Uttam Mataji were married in 1971 and initiated together by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada in 1973. They have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Seeing the high diverse rate in communities, they decided to serve as marital educators since 2004. They have been members of Grahastha Vision Team, GVT, and have been mentored numerous couples and facilitated seminars around the world. They specialize in premarital educations. There are a few more. Several days after taking second initiation, Partha Prabhu became head pujari for Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan in Vancouver, Canada, remained so close 20 years. He is a former board member and trustee of ISKCON Vancouver and has been involved with the Grahastha Vision Team since 2004. He and his wife traveled and facilitated GVT seminars in South Africa, Ireland, England, India, Trinidad, Guyana, Brazil, Chile, Russia, and many European countries, along with Canada and US. He has solemnized to perform legal marriages by the province of British Columbia, which he does after sufficiently counseling the couple. He is certified by the Dasiziyat Family Institute and inspired their Vaishnava 108 inventory, premarital and marriage spiritual strengths based on relationship programs, along with the skill building courses by various other marital therapists, including a level 1 Gottman clinical couples therapy. Quite a lot to read, but just take up time and stop here. So let's welcome Prabhu and Mataji by loudly chanting once Hare Krishna mantra. Hare
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So I could also add to our bio that we have accepted the influence of Kalakanya, old age, and feeling the influence. So they say time and tide wait for no man. Time is something very powerful. It wears away mountains. It's destroyed civilizations, and through time, there's so many transformations, including that within our body from boyhood to youth to old age. And so we'd like to explore a little bit about how this material world is a very temporary place, and how in the human form of life, we've been graced with a very great benediction to have the opportunity to cultivate spiritual life. And especially, we've had the grace of being blessed by the immense blessings to have the association of Srila Prabhupada through his personal presence and through his books, his letters, his tapes. That is such a powerful thing. So Prabhupada's describing here how devotees, they're not affected by this Kalakanya in the same way as the materialist. One time I remember hearing Srila Prabhupada was talking about old age, disease, and death, and someone asked Srila Prabhupada, well, sometimes I see that devotees, they're also becoming ill and dying. And Prabhupada, he said in a very forceful voice, he said, they are not dying. They are going back to Godhead. They're going back to Godhead. So devotional service, it's something very different and very special. So Srimad Bhagavatam describes Ayur Harati Vai Pumsam Ujan Asam Chayan Aso Tashyarte Yachano Nita Uttama Shloka Vartaya, that both by rising and setting, the sun is decreasing the duration of life of everyone, except for one who utilizes his time in hearing the pastimes of the all-good personality of Godhead. So just like sometimes you, maybe as a child, you're playing with the sand and you have a handful of sand and it spills out between your fingers and you can't hold it all. So life is like that. We have a certain allotment of time and it is actually slowly slipping through our fingers imperceptibly by time. And as you become older, it becomes much more perceptible. You feel the influence of time. So that verse in the Bhagavatam describes that one who hears and chants, his destination is very different. He goes back to Godhead. And I would like to explore that. And there's some interesting statements in this canto. And there's a very interesting purport. I think it's in the first chapter. I'm just going to read this to you. Papa's describing there how by engaging in devotional service, one comes to the Brahma Bhuta platform, even if one is a neophyte. Oh, here it is. This is from 4:1:1, the first verse in his canto from the purport. Even for the neophyte devotee, devotional service is considered Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. One becomes transcendently situated, even if one is a neophyte. Brahma Bhuya Kalpate, he transcends the modes of material nature. Devotional service to the Lord is never considered a material activity. Since he is acting on the Brahma Bhuta platform, a devotee is already liberated. He therefore has no need to practice any other type of yoga in order to approach the Brahma Bhuta stage. So here Prabhupada is saying that even speaking for myself as a neophyte, and we're all in the process of sadhana bhakti, and Prabhupada is saying even we who are just engaged in the process of sadhana bhakti can actually be considered on the Brahma Bhuta platform. So that's a very powerful statement, very powerful statement. And at the same time in this canto, in previous chapter, we read the pastime how the Prachetas encountered Lord Shiva. They were going to perform austerities and they encountered Lord Shiva coming out of the water. And Lord Shiva instructed him in this song, which he sang every day. Lord Shiva would chant this song, and the chapter is called "The Song Sung by Lord Shiva." And Lord Shiva, he instructs the Prachetas that he received this sacred song from his father, Lord Brahma, and that Lord Brahma chanted it daily, and all the great sages chanted it daily, and he instructed them to chant this mantra daily. And in that mantra, it's very interesting because we understand how Lord Shiva, he is Vaishnavanam Shambhu. He's the topmost Vaishnava. He's a very elevated devotee, extremely elevated devotee. And yet at the same time, when we read these prayers that he's chanting every day, he's actually praying to the Lord. And in these prayers, he's praying to the sun god. And it's described in the purport how all the energy we derive actually comes from the sun. Even the electrical energy, it's a transformation of the energy in the sun, whether it was from energy from coal or even nuclear fusion or from hydro dams. That's all happened because of the sun. The movement of water creates the hydroelectricity that's been moved by the energy of the sun. Energy is stored within plants, released as fossil fuels. Even within our body, we are eating prasadam. Those vegetables have been grown by the mercy of the sun. So that's coming from Surya Narayan in the sun. And Lord Shiva, he's praying that way. And he's also praying to Lord Aniruddha. And it's described in that section how Surya Narayan is an expansion of Aniruddha. And it's described that Aniruddha, he actually controls our minds. He's the Lord who can actually control our mind. And it's described that Lord Shiva, every day he's praying to Lord Aniruddha to please help make my mind peaceful so that I can engage in pure devotional service. So the topmost Vaishnava, Lord Shiva, he's praying in that way every single day. My dear Lord Aniruddha, please bless me that my mind can become peaceful so I can execute devotional service. So on one hand, we're hearing that even a neophyte can be considered on the Brahmabhuta platform, transcendental to the modes of material nature. And at the same time, we hear how Lord Shiva, he's praying to the Lord in the form of Aniruddha. Please don't let me be influenced by the modes of material nature. Please help my mind become peaceful in the mode of Shuddha so I can engage in pure devotional service. So there's many of these kind of mysterious statements that appear contradictory or appears to be some tension there. But there's very important that we try to understand those statements. So we understand that from this, that the devotional process is extremely powerful. Just even a neophyte engaging in devotional service can come to the Brahmabhuta platform instantly. And I think every one of us who came to Krishna consciousness, we had those kind of moments where you had some amazing realization, some amazing taste for devotional service, very powerful experiences that inspired you to take to the process of Krishna consciousness. So Krishna, he gave us that by his mercy, those experiences of that Brahmabhuta platform, sometimes even just for a moment or two, that gives us inspiration. And we get those experiences from time to time, especially on festival days. They're so wonderful. You become so fully absorbed in devotional service. You can experience a very high level of Krishna consciousness. Or you visit Vrindavan, Mayapur, very powerful experiences. And at the same time, because we are in the process of sadhana bhakti, there are challenges. We have a material conditioning and a material mind. that we're trying to control so that we can come to that platform of pure bhakti. And in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there's some very important instructions hidden within those purports that are very crucial to our spiritual advancement. I know sometimes there's this the concept called the philosopher's stone. Has anyone heard of that? The philosopher's stone? That even like in 15th, 17th century, there was many academics that had this concept. There was something called the philosopher's stone. And they thought the philosopher's stone was something that would transform things into gold. That was their concept of the philosopher's stone. That if something would make things magically turn into gold. So maybe they heard something about the Chintamani stone in the spiritual world. But Srila Prabhupada's books, they're actually made of that philosopher's stone, that they can transform our hearts, which are steel framed, which are cold as rock. The Srila Prabhupada's words and purports can actually transform our hearts, soften them, and so we can actually experience and execute bhakti yoga. And Srila Prabhupada, he gives a very interesting vision of that process in the 14th chapter about the modes of material nature. And there Krishna is explaining how the modes of material nature compete for supremacy. Sometimes goodness predominates, and then ignorance and passion kind of take over. And sometimes passion takes over, and then ignorance pulls passion down. Sometimes passion pulls ignorance up. Sometimes goodness pulls it back out of ignorance and passion to goodness, and then sometimes we're pulled back down. And there's a struggle in our lives and our minds to come to the platform of goodness. And Srila Prabhupada, he also, again, the bar seems very low in one sense, because in that purport, in the first verse of this chapter, Prabhupada is saying that even the neophyte is on the Brahma Bhuta platform. And the same time in the 14th chapter, Srila Prabhupada is saying how Krishna's nature is Shuddha Sattva, and to attain Krishna, we actually have to come to the platform of Shuddha Sattva, not just occasionally, but to fully live in that platform of goodness and pure goodness. So how to do that? And so Srila Prabhupada, he describes in that one purport in that chapter how by practice one can come to the mode of goodness, by practice. And in Bhagavad Gita, he describes different types of activities in the mode of goodness and passion and ignorance. He talks about charity and goodness, ignorance, and passion, eating and goodness, ignorance, and passion. So many different activities. And just like we may even experience how those influences, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the 14th chapter, they manifest in all activities. And I like to reflect on how they influence my japa. It's like if I'm chanting and I'm falling asleep, what mode am I probably being influenced by? Probably ignorance. And if I'm chanting and I'm thinking about everything I have to do today, and I'm thinking about all the world politics, and I'm thinking about so many things, that's probably completely in passion. If I'm focused on the holy name, and I'm getting at least some little taste by that direct focus on chanting and hearing, I'm coming to the mode of goodness. And someday, if we can actually chant purely, then we'll actually experience that ecstasy like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is praying for. When will that day come when tears flow from my eyes like torrents of rain? And Vishnujan Swami, I remember many years ago, he visited Vancouver and he did some bhajans upstairs in the temple, small temple room. I was in a little room upstairs, and he did some bhajans. And I remember he was reading the translation for one of the bhajans, and it was, oh when will a day be mine, offenses ceasing, taste for the name increasing, when in my heart will your mercy shine? So that was Bhajan by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So he's praying like that too. He's also liberated soul. He's praying, when will I develop that taste? When will I give up my offenses? And so every morning we recite the 10 offenses against the holy name. So again, we're on the Brahmagupta platform, but we have to come to the Brahmagupta platform by avoiding the offenses against the holy name and becoming absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada, he told our god sister and mother Jamuna once, that devotional service means attention to detail, to be very conscientious of every small detail. And that focus is actually what pure devotional service is about, to see everything we do as Krishna's service. One of our god sisters wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada once, and she was expressing some despair. She was like looking after her kids, and she was thinking that I wanted to do some more direct service. And she wrote to Srila Prabhupada, said, wouldn't it be better for me to do some direct service? And Srila Prabhupada's reply, he actually said there's no difference between direct and indirect service. And he gave the example of how you have an electrical system and there's wires running through the building here. One wire is connected to the other, all the way back to the powerhouse. And he said, if you touch any one of those wires, the energy of the powerhouse is there. And he said, in the same way, if one acts on the order of a spiritual master, he does his seva, his service, for the satisfaction of the spiritual master, then one's actually connected to the spiritual master and connected to Krishna. And he said, there's no such thing as direct or indirect. So it's actually a matter of consciousness, that we're actually trying to become very aware and conscious. As Krishna says, yat karoshi yarashnasi, all you do and all you eat. So what does all mean? What does all exclude? The word all doesn't really exclude anything. It includes everything. So Krishna is saying, all you do. One time, Srila Prabhupada, he even said, even the alcoholic, if Prabhupada said, if he's drinking his alcohol, and if he can even just think there's water in this alcohol, and that water in the alcohol is a taste of Krishna. Prabhupada said, even if he could just think that, he'll make great spiritual advancement. So that's all very encompassing. So spiritual life means to develop that consciousness. And so our sadhana, it's coming to the morning program, it's chanting our rounds, it's reading the Bhagavatam, and it's also yat karoshi yarashnasi, all we do and all we eat, that we want to do everything to the best of our ability for the satisfaction of Krishna. And in that way we become connected with Krishna more solidly. Prabhupada once gave a nice definition of the difference between the spiritual realm and the material realm. And the definition he gave was the material realm was that aspect of the creation of the Lord in which his all-pervasiveness is not perceived. The material realm is that aspect of the Lord's creation in which his all-pervasiveness is not perceived. So when we don't perceive Krishna as everywhere, we're in the material realm. But if we can see everything in relationship with Krishna, we are actually living in the spiritual world. Prabhupada was making that point once in a lecture on 26 2nd Avenue. And he was lecturing on the verse, how earth, air, fire, water, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego are my separated material energies. And it's described in the purport how those energies are actually non-different than Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada in this lecture, he said, you are not sitting on the floor. You are not sitting on a floor. He said, you are sitting on Krishna. So you're actually sitting on Krishna. It's like, I mean, how often can we actually think like that? But that's the nature of spiritual consciousness, that a liberated devotee, he sees Krishna everywhere. He doesn't just see a tree, but somehow he sees that tree in connection with Krishna. He sees the cloud in connection. He sees everything in connection with Krishna. So that process of bhakti yoga, in one sense, it's very easy, and at the same time, it's seems very complicated, and it seems there's a lot of work to do, and that's true. There is a lot of work to do in the process of sadhana bhakti, and Srila Prabhupada described also in Bhagavad Gita that one can become Krishna conscious in one moment. He said, or it can take many, many births, many, many births. He said it's simply a matter of understanding the facts and accepting. So just like King Kulashekar, he asked the demigods a benediction, when will I leave my body? They said, 1 moment from now. 1 moment. And so he immediately fixed his mind on Krishna, completely became absorbed. But King Kulashekar, he was fortunate, he knew. King Parikshit, Prabhupada also said, King Parikshit was fortunate, he knew he had 7 days to prepare. And Prabhupada made the point that we don't know. Do we have 7 days, 7 minutes, 7 years? We don't know. So Prabhupada was making the point in that discussion that we should see, as this verse is describing, how the time is slipping through our fingers, it's moving, and we should become very conscious to utilize our time in becoming Krishna conscious. Just like for those who are not devotees, Prabhupada described how the human form of life is a very great benediction, a very great advantage in which you can cultivate spiritual life. The animals do not have that facility. That's the difference between human life and animal life. Human life has a higher intelligence which can be utilized for cultivating spiritual knowledge. And Prabhupada described how, he gave this analogy, he said, just like there's many people working for the government, and you have an ordinary clerk behind the desk, he's getting his paycheck every week, and that's his situation. And then there's some high-placed government minister, he has very important responsibilities to do, and they give him a car, they give him a secretary, he's getting a high salary. And Prabhupada said, why? Why is he getting those things? Because he's doing some very responsible, extremely responsible duties. So he's given more facility. And Prabhupada explained that if that government minister, if he doesn't execute his responsibilities, they're going to take away those benefits. They'll probably fire him. And he said, in the same way, in the human form of life, if we do not accept that responsibility, then there's a danger that opportunity in the facility of the human life can be taken away, which is what happens to those in the material world who do not cultivate spiritual life. So that's why spreading Krishna consciousness is so important. And so for devotees, we understand that neha bakrama nashosti pratravayona vijite trayate mahatovai, that Krishna, he assures that if one engages in devotional service to any degree, there's no loss, there's no diminution, that whatever advancement one makes, that will not be lost. And he just compared that to a bank account, which never recedes, that your balance will always be there guaranteed. So we have that opportunity to make spiritual advancement in this life. And especially we have that facility of chanting the holy name and reading Srila Prabhupada's books, association with devotees. It's actually extremely great benediction. We see Maharaj Parikshit at the end of life, just Shukadeva Goswami shows up on the scene. All these great sages come, and Krishna just arranged the most auspicious situation for him to spend his final 7 days hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we've also been graced with that opportunity to have the association devotees to hear Srila Prabhupada's books, and especially sometimes in the beginning, we may not have that taste. We may have the conviction and the understanding, but sometimes we don't have the taste. That it may be difficult to chant the holy name, and sometimes it's hard to focus on reading the Bhagavatam. But at least we have the intellectual, philosophical understanding that this is the ultimate goal of life. And we have the experience of seeing those who have become absorbed in reading Srila Prabhupada's books and chanting the holy name. We see they're becoming happy and satisfied in their lives. And that gives us the strength and determination to persevere. And as Srila Prabhupada describes, as it's described in the Upadeshamrita by Rupa Goswami, in the beginning, we are infected by the jaundice of ignorance, a disease which covers our spiritual understanding, which does not enable us to taste the sweetness of chanting the holy name and reading Srimad Bhagavatam. But Rupa Goswami gives this very nice analogy how the material situation is like jaundice. And one who has jaundice, has this unusual side effect that anything sweet which you place on your tongue will taste very bitter. And one of the cures for jaundice is to suck on rock sugar. So you have to suck on this rock sugar, which because of the disease tastes bitter, but by taking that bitter medicine, your liver becomes purified and the sweet taste eventually returns. And in the same way, because of material conditioning, we may not have that full taste for hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam or chanting the holy name. But therefore, we do it by regulation. Every day you have a dosage, 16 rounds of the Maha Mantra. We have a dosage to regularly hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, associate with devotees, take prasadam. Those activities, they purify and remove that ignorance very gradually so that we can get that sweet taste. And so Srimad Bhagavatam is a most wonderful literature. There's a nice verse from Bhagavad Gita on the back. I can't remember it's exactly, but in from the purport of that verse, Prabhupada's describing, he said, you cannot understand Krishna even by discussing the Vedas. By discussing the Vedas, you can't actually understand Krishna or come to perfection. And even Lord Brahma in Brahma Samhita, he was describing that even if one studies the Vedas for thousands of years, he may not even be able to approach the tips of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. But he says, Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakto. By the process of bhakti, one can very easily attain Krishna. So within the Srimad Bhagavatam is invested bhakti, immense, powerful bhakti. And by being exposed to that bhakti, we become purified. So that quote, Srila Prabhupada describes how by engaging in the process of bhakti, one becomes purified. That our heart actually becomes purified. So I'm going to end there and ask if there's any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for your divine association and nectarian class today. Maybe we have 15 minutes time. Can you share some pastimes of the Srila Prabhupada?
I knew that was coming. I was thinking of one thing this morning about Srila Prabhupada's books and how it's important to understand Srila Prabhupada's books and to correctly understand them, because sometimes we can have little motivations in our understanding and not really be able to get the exact meaning, and it can become problematic. And we had a very practical experience of that in the 1974, 75. Radha Krishna deities were installed in the Vancouver Temple in Canada. And shortly after installation, they were transferred to a very, very rural project, which was kind of high in the mountains in British Columbia, Canada. And at that time, there was Radhakrishna, Jagannath, and Gaurnitai. And we had many American devotees who were also in the temple doing Sankirtan, bringing in Lakshmi and income from the temple for the temple. And one day the immigration people came in and deported all the American devotees. So all of a sudden the temple population just dropped, which meant the income also dropped. And so that became quite difficult. We're maintaining 3 sets of Radhakrishna deities, garlands, prasadam, everything with a handful of devotees. And at that time, the Bhagavatam had just been published with the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj. And in one of those purports, Prabhupada describes how Dhruva, he made a form of the Lord out of earth. And in the purport, Prabhupada describes how the deity can be made of jewels, stone, earth, even within the mind, metal. And he described how one can worship the Lord according to time and circumstance with what is available. So our temple president, he considered, okay, here we are, and time and circumstance, we're kind of in a very remote place. There's not many devotees. There's not much money. That's our time and circumstance. So he concluded that in this time and circumstance, we should maybe stop offering flower garlands to the deities and stop making vases for the deities. We'll just buy a few flowers for artiks. And he concluded we should stop purchasing opulent boga for the deities. And so this is winter in Canada. You probably cannot even conceive of what winter is like in Canada. 4 or 5 months of snow. We're in a rural place, and we had what's called a root cellar, which is underground storage for vegetables. And in that storage place, there was apples, cabbage, potatoes, and maybe some carrots. And that became the menu for the deities. Apples, cabbage, potatoes, and carrots, every offering. And he also concluded, well, there's not many Brahmins here anymore. And our request for second initiation was in the mail. And at that time, there was no internet, no fax. There was, what was it called? Telegram? Telex, which is extremely, it was like $4 or $5 a word to send it. So that was out of the question. So Prabhupada was in India at the time. And the letter went to Prabhupada to India. And sometimes by the time the letter caught up to Srila Prabhupada and you got it back, it would be several months. Thank you. So for several months, the deities got just arctic flowers, very paltry offerings. And the temple president had myself and my wife, although we only had first initiation, doing some direct seva for the deities. And also at that time, the deities had been installed. Srila Prabhupada wasn't there for the installation. And the temple president wanted to send some photographs of the deities to Srila Prabhupada and ask him to give the deities a name. So that day he went to the local town and purchased some flowers. And he had my wife and the Matajis make some flower vases, 2 flower vases. And he placed the 2 flower vases on Radhakrishna's altar and he took a picture. Then he moved the vases to Gaurnitai's altar and took a picture. And then he moved the vases to Lord Jagannath and Balaram Subhadра's altar, took a picture. And then he got those printed and he sent them off to Srila Prabhupada. So eventually the letter came back. You can actually read the letter. It's in this book called Darshan. There's a picture of the Vancouver deities, and the letter is there. It's a very beautiful letter. Srila Prabhupada says, the photographs of your newly installed deities, he said, are very, very beautiful. He didn't just say very, he said very, very, very beautiful. And he said, you can name them Sri Sri Radha Madana Mohan. And in the letter, he described how you should worship these deities very nicely as they worship the deities in Los Angeles and New Vrindavan, and make sure they have nice bathing ceremony daily. And then out of the blue, Srila Prabhupada said, and you should always make sure they have nice flowers, nice foodstuffs, and they're only served by duly initiated Brahmins. So how did Prabhupada knew that? No one could have told him. There wasn't even a phone in Vrindavan at the time. How did Prabhupada know that? Somehow Krishna complained and told Prabhupada, straighten these people out. So immediately it all changed. And actually, I think just probably the day before that, we were personally initiated by Prabhupada in 1973, and our second initiation was done by mail. And the letter for the second initiation came, I think, just about the same day as that letter with the name for the deities. And I remember after the initiation ceremony, I was sitting with Uttama, and I had the letter in my hand, and I was reading that. And in that letter, Prabhupada said, if you worship, he said, Shri Shri Radha Madana Mohan have very kindly come to you in this form. And he said, if you serve them very nicely, as he described in the letter, he said, and if you receive them in that consciousness, he said, you will all develop love of God, pure love of God. I just thought, wow, somehow I have to do that. And somehow I came overcome with this feeling that somehow I was going to become head pujari. I'd only been initiated the day before. And somehow within a week, I ended up becoming head pujari, which I remained for almost 20 years. But it was such a powerful thing that Prabhupada was very much in his letters, very present. And I have a very strong conviction that Srila Prabhupada is very much present within his books. Actually, it's a little hard for me to sometimes talk about Prabhupada because we were with Prabhupada for his concluding pastimes. And it was a very powerful experience. But one experience I had there was coming to Vrindavan on the plane. I was reading this book, the first canto, and I came across the verse, Nasta Prayeshu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utama Shloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. That by regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service unto the pure devotee, everything inauspicious within the heart becomes practically destroyed to nil, and loving service to the Lord becomes established as an irrevocable fact. And in that purport, Srila Prabhupada described there are three things. He said there's Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. There's the book Bhagavat, which is the Bhagavatam, which is non-different than Bhagavan. And he said there's the person Bhagavat, who leads his life in terms of the book Bhagavat. And he said any one of those three can award you complete perfection in life. And so I was thinking about that as on the plane on the way to Vrindavan. And we got to Vrindavan, and then I went and had a shower. And the first thing I did was went to Srila Prabhupada's room and I offered my dandavats to Srila Prabhupada. I looked at Srila Prabhupada, and somehow Srila Prabhupada let me see, or Krishna let me see that how Srila Prabhupada was the embodiment of his books, and he was embodied in his books. And it was very extremely powerful realization for me that, and to this day, I can see, the rare moments when I do read Srimad Bhagavatam with attention and a little smidgen of devotion, I can see that Prabhupada is actually directly speaking with something that's extremely appropriate and applicable to exactly what's going on in my life, and something I can try and apply. So Srila Prabhupada, he's actually available for all of us, Narahari Prabhu was asking me, or Narasinghadev Prabhu was asking me, he was saying how his generation, the younger devotees, they're inspired by seeing the Prabhupada disciples. It inspires them in the devotional service. And I told him, we Prabhupada disciples are inspired, and we feel Prabhupada's presence seeing what you are doing. We see Prabhupada's presence in your project here, like building this temple. We see that's totally Prabhupada. He's empowering you to do that. And we see Prabhupada in that way. So it's not that only the Prabhupada disciples have access to Prabhupada, but we all, as followers of Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, engaged in the service, we all have this free access to Srila Prabhupada. It's very rare to people to go in Srila Prabhupada's room, to see Srila Prabhupada personally, very rare. But all of us can, anytime we can open Srila Prabhupada's books and have direct access to Srila Prabhupada through his books. And that's non-different. Srila Prabhupada, he was known on occasion, some devotee would go all the way to India to see Srila Prabhupada to ask some question. And on one occasion, devotee asked a question, and Srila Prabhupada's reply was, haven't you read my books? Everything is in my books. That was Prabhupada's answer. Everything is in the books. So Srila Prabhupada is there and within his books. And that is personalism. That's personalism. And the large, like Srila Prabhupada, he came Nirvishesha, Shunyavadi, Pastat Satarni, to deliver the Western world and the entire world, which is filled with voidism and impersonalism. And like, why do we commit offenses? And why are we inattentive when we chant? It's actually because we're impersonal. We don't realize that Krishna is in his name. If you listen to the Nectar Devotion lectures that Srila Prabhupada gave at Rupa Goswami's Samadhi, at the very first lecture, Srila Prabhupada's talking about the importance of chanting the holy name with attention. He said, especially in the holy Dham. He said, the holy name is so sacred. It's directly Krishna. He said, you have to be so careful and so attentive when you chant. So careful, so attentive. So the holy name is directly Krishna, but because we're impersonal, we're conditioned by that impersonalism, we don't realize that. We chant and we forget that this is just some sound vibration. I'm moving the beads and vibrating this mantra because of duty. But it's that activity is actually directly connecting us to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's not easy to realize that all the time, but we should. That's the importance of hearing and chanting the Bhagavatam, because it helps us to remember that what we're dealing with is something extremely powerful and extremely sacred. And we never want to lose sight of that vision. So I'm gonna, maybe if anyone has one other question, I'll ask Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for enlightening us with your words. Prabhuji, you and Mataji have been serving for so many years. What can we do in our beginning years so we know that we'll be like you years and years after today, decades and decades after, like you have been serving?
I think you want to be you. Maybe you can be inspired by the example that we did something for Srila Prabhupada and we're attempting to the best of our ability. And what you can do is be introspective and consider, what's the best thing I can do for Srila Prabhupada? What ability, what talent, what qualities do I have that I can utilize in Krishna's service? And see that as your goal in life, that you want to accomplish something for Srila Prabhupada. You want to do something for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure, whatever it is. Srila Prabhupada encouraged everyone, according to their ability, according to their nature, to engage in Krishna's service. So find some service that's very meaningful for you, and try to perfect it to the best of your ability. And then also, in that process, share whatever successes you have had with others. That's very important. So I encourage you all to to know that you are all very important servants in Srila Prabhupada's mission. Very, very important servants. Even someone's cleaning the temple, someone's sweeping the floor. Srila Prabhupada, he once said in a lecture, a devotee may be sweeping the floor in the temple, but he's not a sweeper. Prabhupada said he is not a sweeper. Prabhupada said he's teaching others to engage in devotional service. That is what he's not just a sweeper. So what does that mean? I'm sweeping the floor. So I should be thinking, I should be doing this the best of my ability in Krishna consciousness. So if someone walks in the door, they see a happy devotee sweeping the floor, they think, wow, even the devotee who's sweeping the floor is so happy. One of my godbrothers told me that he joined, and the first devotee he associated with was, you're probably familiar with Jayananda, who was very instrumental in starting the Rath Yatras all over the world. And he said, one of Jayananda's duties was to take out the garbage. So it might seem like a quite lowly service to deal with the trash. And at that time, all the trash for the week was put in a garage building, and it would sit there for a week in the summer. You can imagine. Didn't smell too good. And they would take these bags, put them in a truck, and take them to the dump. So Jayananda said, oh, Muralidhar, you want to come with me? And he said, Jayananda even had a clothespin on his nose because garbage smelled. But he said Jayananda was so blissful. He was so happy. He was doing something for Krishna. He was so happy. And that inspired him to take to Krishna consciousness, to seeing that even the garbage man is so happy. Well, I should become a devotee. I can become that happy. So we actually have that duty to do our service and be happy. Be happy. And that will please Prabhupada. That will please Lord Jagannath. So thank you very much for your association. I feel very fortunate to be here. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Ditto. We were initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1973. And so at that time, we were in Vancouver and we hadn't been around very long. But the temple president said, well, Srila Prabhupada's coming. Do you want to get initiated now? If you wait for 6 months, we were supposed to wait 6 months. He said, you won't get personal initiation by Srila Prabhupada. So we said, well, sure. So at that time, it's kind of like India, no seatbelt laws, right? You just take all the seats out of the back of the van, you put most of the temple into the van and you drive.
There's no seats either in there.
Yeah, I took the seats out also, yeah. And so we drove 3 days to Los Angeles from Vancouver. And so we got there. And Srila Prabhupada was speaking on the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty, how, nobody can kill them. So they Krishna made an arrangement where they actually fought amongst themselves because nobody else can have them make the arrangement to leave the planet and go back to Godhead. So a long story, but they were drinking rice wine. So this is in the purport. And Prabhupada said, yes, you can make a very nice wine out of rice. And if you ferment it nicely, you can make a first class, I forget if he said bourbon, I think. I'm going, okay. First class wine, okay. I was supposed to make the vows, no meat eating, no intoxication. Prabhupada's telling me how to make this nice wine. And if I do it really well, I can turn it into bourbon. So, okay, I'll file that away, So you see, Prabhupada was such an expert, he's like a chemist. He knows how to do everything. He even knows how to make wine, even though he never did it, right? So you could see his expertise, but you kind of got to think, okay, I'll file that one. So then the next day we got initiated, and there was one gentleman that also came with us. He was an older devotee. We were all 20, and he was probably
50.
Was he 50?
Yeah, 50,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. And so he'd been having a bit of a hard time giving up smoking. But he was doing pretty good at it. And so the temple president had talked to Srila Prabhupada and said, you know, he's had a hard time giving up smoking, but I think he's doing well now. So when this devotee came up to get initiated by Srila Prabhupada and take the beads, Prabhupada actually kind of held his hand a little bit longer, like, so he didn't just take the bead and go, the beads and go. And so he said, so what are the 4 regulative principles? And so he said, no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, and no intoxication. And Prabhupada said, and that means no smocking. Smocking. And so it was just, you know, just very personal. Right? So the next day, we were engaged in, well, at least I was, making garlands for a big wedding. And I'd never seen a Vedic wedding before. We'd only been in the movement, you know, 3 years. And my husband and I were married. And we were told that until we got initiated, we weren't supposed to have a fire yagya because we wanted to have a, you know, so after initiation, then we could go have our fire yagya. So we were making garlands, and we went in the temple room the next day, and there was this, you know, mandap with all the garlands and everything like that. And lo and behold, there's one ex-sannyasi getting married to the heir of the Toyota car company. So this devotee had been preaching in Japan, and somehow or other he'd come across this devotee, and she was quite, you know, interested in Krishna consciousness. And so he thought he should cultivate her, but he was a sannyasi. And so he thought, well, you know, maybe I should give up my sannyas because this is a real catch. You know, we get this person to become a devotee. It's going to really do something for Srila Prabhupada's movement. So I'm sure there was more to the story, but I don't know what it was. Anyway, somehow or other, Srila Prabhupada could see the writing on the wall. And so he said, all right, you can give up your sannyas. I think he'd already given it up, and you can marry this person. He'd already given up the sannyas. And so in order to, like, Prabhupada was so expert. Okay, he's given up his sannyas. He's somehow rather attached to this lady. And how do I elevate this? You know, it's not a good situation. And Prabhupada's just trying to figure out, how am I going to save this person? And how am I going to elevate him? So he thought, okay, he's a sannyasi. He can't just go like live with this lady, or, you know, you can't have some illicit relationship. So I guess they're going to have to get married. You know, you could just, like, it looks so inappropriate. But Srila Prabhupada's mood was to keep the devotee and elevate them. So first of all, she has to become initiated. So Srila Prabhupada comes for the initiation, and he asks her, what are the 4 regulative principles? And she looked a little bit like she didn't understand English. She was Japanese. And so Srila Prabhupada immediately looks at this Prabhu, and he says, does she know the 4 regulative principles? And he said, the devotee said, yes. Prabhupada says, what are they? And so he listed the 4 regulative principles. And somehow or other, and then Srila Prabhupada, after the initiation, Srila Prabhupada left, and they got married. You know, he's sanctioning it because it has to be. It's not like he's really so happy they're getting married, but it's better than, you know, whatever. So years later, it's interesting how just something sticks in your mind. Yeah. So years later, this devotee, he actually became a leader in Eastern US, and he was a temple president of New York. But somehow or other, his wife, you know, she managed to need a servant. And so one of the ladies had to become her servant. And then she got to some state where she was taking up Krishna consciousness, but she still wasn't completely purified. And she was under the understanding that eggs are still vegetarian. You know, like here, vegetarian doesn't include eggs, but sometimes in North America, you have to say pure veg, right? Because otherwise it includes eggs. So she thought I should have my eggs offered to the deities. And the devotees were freaking out. Some of the devotees were leaving, and some of them just, like, we wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada. So the letter comes back and Prabhupada said, why do you have to ask me this? You know we don't offer eggs to the deities. But he said, the devotees that have stayed, he said, I very much appreciated that you stayed and you tried to rectify the situation. He didn't go that this is just a mess and I'm going to go. I mean, maybe sometimes there's nothing we can do and to save ourselves, we have to go somewhere. But it kind of struck me that Prabhupada wanted us to, stay and see what we could do to improve the situation. So even though we didn't have like a lot of personal association with Srila Prabhupada, this is going on and we all hear it and we know all the details. And so these things very much affect you, how you perform your devotional service on the inspirations that you hear that Srila Prabhupada wanted. So later I thought, Prabhupada was so intelligent. She wouldn't say the regulative principles, and you put two and two together, you could see why, because she had enough culture that she couldn't promise something that she wasn't going to do. And so she couldn't promise it. So she kind of made a situation. And Prabhupada's so intelligent, he puts the responsibility on the husband. You say the regulative principles. He gave him the responsibility to, make this situation better. So I could just see like the expertise of Srila Prabhupada. He puts the responsibility where it needs to be. And he's giving us all chances, but we have to utilize them. Maybe we can make a mistake and Srila Prabhupada might be forgiving and he might give us some way to fix it. Because sometimes, devotees would fall down and he said, well, when they come back, maybe they're Brahman initiated. What do we do? Do you have to take initiation again? You haven't been following. Prabhupada said if they engage in the practice for 6 months, then they can again chant their Gayatri. And if they're sincere, they can come back in devotional service. So we see that there's always a process for rectification. Sorry, I'm skipping around, but I just read something the other day. One devotee, he was a little bit proud and he was always bragging about his devotional service. And he came into Srila Prabhupada's room in London and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm always falling down and I don't know what to do. I just can't, I want to be engaged in the devotional service and I want to be sincere, but somehow or other, I fall down. And Prabhupada burst out laughing. And the devotees, he said, I've never seen Prabhupada laugh like this. And so somehow Srila Prabhupada understands, like this devotee was like so proud, I'm so good at this, I'm so good at that. But then he comes into Prabhupada and he has to admit, actually I fall down. And Prabhupada said, a child, when they are learning, they fall down. He said, you think you are such a big person that you're not going to make a mistake and have to rectify and come up? And he was just laughing and laughing. You think you're such a hot shot? Didn't say that word. So, he understands that we're all conditioned souls and sometimes we're not going to become perfect immediately. But Krishna's kind. We have another chance. It's not just because we fall, we stay fallen. We can somehow or other rectify and keep engaging in the process of devotional service, and the process of devotional service purifies us. So it's just all these little interactions with Srila Prabhupada that give you those big realizations, and of how to stay engaged in the process of devotional service somehow or other, because that devotional service is going to purify us so that we can attain the ultimate goal of going back home, back to Godhead. So those are just some, little interactions that have, you can get big realizations from. So any way you come in contact with Srila Prabhupada can give you big realizations and impact your life sincerely. So please take to the process, engage in devotional service, and your life will become perfect. Hare Krishna.
Haribo. We thank Prabhuji and Mataji for giving us a chance to
hear Srimad Bhagavatam, and especially about Person Bhagavatam they shared about Prabhupada. So heart touching. How we can pursue Prabhupada. Prabhuji was mentioning his personal experience also. How we can see Hare Krishna. Pursue Prabhupada in the Prabhupada's books. And the sentence Prabhuji made that Prabhupada is embodied.
He is embodied within his books, and he is the embodiment
Top. So because many of us, we always think that no, we have not got personal association of Prabhupada, but by reading books, like we can see how they are so emotional when they're talking about Prabhupada, that incidents. So we also can have that experience when we pursue that Prabhupada in the Prabhupada's purpose. So we thank both of them for giving us their association. And Saturday, Sunday also their seminar for devotees, congregation members. And they have a book also, that Heart and Soul Connection. Wonderful book for Grihastha devotees and upcoming Grihasthas. So you can read that book. So we thank them for the association they have given us by loudly chanting once Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna devotees, Darshan, I will end the Zoom session. Hare Krishna devotees, thank you. And tomorrow is the auspicious appearance day of Srila Advaita Acharya. I'll be fasting until noon. Thank you. Hare Krishna devotees, I will end the Zoom session with Vaishnava Pranam. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhobhya patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. HG Partha Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.